Recording so folks can be with us here. Okay. Well, we are going to talk about the beginnings of Anglicanism, which, if you recall from last time, is the wider umbrella term for the wider church that the Episcopal Church is a part of, is the Anglican Church. And it's called that because it comes from England, which is where Anglo comes from, England. So, we're going to start in the year in the late 1520s, early 1530s, all of this happens. So I don't have dates exactly in my head, but they're not that important. So we're going to start with the airbrushed version of this. Ready? The airbrushed version says that this was King Henry VIII and his wife, Catherine of Aragon. King Henry VIII was King of England in the early 1500s. His wife was Catherine of Aragon, who was Spanish. Henry, they had one child. Her name was Mary. This is Anne Boleyn. Anne Boleyn caught Henry's eye, and he said to himself, I would rather be married to her than to Catherine, because she's older and doesn't seem to be able to have any more kids. And so he starts having an affair with Anne Boleyn, and he says to Parliament, all right, I want to get a divorce, but the problem with that is that the Pope and the Parliament says to him, okay, you are now head of the Church of England. Congratulations, sincerely, Parliament. We don't have to worry about the Pope anymore, so you can divorce your wife. Yay! That's the airbrushed version.
Right. Wow.
Like that?
Now we're talking.
Those images from the Tudors, by the way. Here's the real version. This is actually King Henry VIII. Right. He doesn't look like Jonathan Rhys-Meyers. And his wife, Catherine of Aragon. Catherine of Aragon was originally betrothed to Henry's older brother, who decided he didn't want to be king. And so Henry becomes king instead. They, again, have one child named Mary. We'll talk about her in a minute. The Reformation happens in Europe during this time, the Reformation being the time where the reformers like Martin Luther and John Calvin and Ulrich Zwingli and others decided to change the way their churches functioned and break away from the Roman Catholic Church. And this happened in various places, like in what is modern-day Germany. That's where Martin Luther was, and other places in France and Switzerland and elsewhere. But crucially, not in England. And you want to know why it didn't happen in England? Because King Henry VIII said, no, we're not going to do any of that in England. And so the Pope named him a defender of the faith of the Catholic Church. Because Henry said, no, we are not having any of that in our country on this side of the English Channel. We will not have any of that Reformation. Now, there is a non-religious reason why Henry would want to do this. And it has to do with when you have any type of reform going on in your country, the people who are in charge, like the king, might not like that. Because if you can reform the church, guess what else you can reform? The monarchy. And so it makes sense that Henry would want to defend the faith here, because he doesn't want anything to happen to his power base. So he is named the defender of the faith in the Roman Catholic Church. This is the Pope who gave him that title, Pope Clement VII. And this is Charles V of Spain, King of Spain. Now, the important thing to note about these two guys is that this guy right here, Charles V of Spain, is related to the Queen of England, Catherine of Aragon. Okay? So let's just hold on to those two guys for just a minute. So, now we have the real Anne Boleyn, not Natalie Dormer, and still Parliament. Henry decides that he does not want to be married to Catherine of Aragon anymore, because he wants to be with Anne Boleyn. And again, Catherine and Henry have one child. And so Henry, I skipped a slide. No, I didn't skip a slide. I just need to mention that also. It's been a while since I taught this class. So we have Henry wanting to get divorced. And the Pope is not going to allow that to happen. and there's reasons for it that have nothing to do with religion. It has to do with war and politics, which we can get into in a second. Henry is involved in lots of wars, as most of the kings in the 1500s are, and his coffers are running low. And so in order to recharge his treasury, Henry looks out at his lands and he says, wow, these monasteries in my lands are really, really wealthy. How can I get my hands on the money in the monasteries? And the way you do that is by liquidating those monasteries, kicking all the monks out and taking all of their land and money. And you can't really do that when the Pope is still in charge of all of those monasteries from afar, but you can do that when you are in charge of the church in your own country. So he's got that in the back of his mind. He has these two different reasons to want to become the head of the church in England. One was economic, and one was romantic. So that's why we have so many ruined monasteries in England to this day. This is what Henry actually looked like. This is Henry VIII right here. It's a real picture. Henry was a horrible glutton. He was like the poster child of the sin of this, one of the 7 deadly sins of gluttony. When I think about Henry VIII in my head, near the end of his life, he looks like Jabba the Hutt. Okay, so here we go. You guys ready for this? All right.
I'm ready.
Wait, I think I know.
Well, we're going to start with Catherine of Aragon. Now, this is important because remember I mentioned the Pope. The Pope would not give Henry what's called an annulment, as opposed to a divorce, an annulment. Henry said, I want an annulment because my wife, Catherine of Aragon, was really married to my brother, and then she ended up being my wife, so it's not really, it wasn't really the whole marriage doesn't smack of authentic. And that was his reasoning with the Pope. And the Pope said no, but the reason the Pope says no, again, is Catherine of Aragon is related to the King of Spain, and the Pope needs the King of Spain's help with a war that's going on in Italy at this time. And so the Pope can't piss off the King of Spain because he needs his troops. And the way you don't piss off the King of Spain is by telling the King of England, you got to stay with your wife, who's Spanish, because if I annul this wedding and you get rid of Catherine, it looks bad for Spain. Everybody with me so far?
Yeah.
Pretty good, right? So Catherine of Aragon. So Parliament names Henry VIII the head of the Church of England. And we're going to get into that a little bit in a second, but let's go through his wives first because this is the fun part. So Catherine of Aragon is he divorces Catherine of Aragon, and she goes off kind of into exile, basically, somewhere else in England with her daughter, Mary. And we'll get back to Mary in a minute. Then we have, I think does this do what I think it does? Is my, nope. Oh, it does it there. Okay. It does over in the corner there. I can't remember how my PowerPoint works. Then he marries Anne Boleyn. Anne Boleyn and he have one child as well. A daughter named, anybody? Elizabeth. Daughter named Elizabeth. But then Anne Boleyn displeases Henry, and he has her head cut off. Great. And then he marries a third time and marries Jane Seymour. Not Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman, this one. Marries Jane Seymour, and they have a child together as well, and his name is Edward. They finally have a boy, which at this point now, you need to have a boy to be in the succession. Up until now, there have not been queens of England who have been in charge. That's going to change very soon, though. Jane Seymour dies on her own. She dies in childbirth with Edward. And then Henry marries Anne of Cleves. Cleves is in the Low Countries. But apparently the reports of her beauty were exaggerated, and Henry took one look at her and said, nope, and sent her right back, and they weren't married very long, and he divorced her too. So she dodged a bullet. Well done, Anne of Cleves. Then he marries Catherine Howard, with whom he's probably been having a torrid affair this whole time anyway. And she, like Anne Boleyn, is... Hey, sweetie.
Mom's here with Charlie. I'm going to go.
You're leaving?
Yeah.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Aunt Catherine Howard, like Anne Boleyn, displeases Henry at some point, and guess what happens to her? That's her head cut off, too. Eventually, Henry marries for his 6th time Catherine Parr, and Catherine Parr does the thing that none of the rest of them do, which is outlive... Well, I guess the other divorcees outlive him, too, but as the wife, outlives Henry, and he dies while he and Catherine Parr are married. And so we get the old divorced beheaded died, divorced beheaded survived of the 6 wives of Henry VIII. So let's keep going. Any questions so far?
All good.
Because this is the part that I think gets very interesting. So after Henry dies, his son, his 3rd child, but because he's the boy, he's the one that is in the line of succession. It becomes King Edward VI. King Edward VI was a sickly child, and he was under the tutelage of this guy, Archbishop Thomas Cranmer. We will talk more about him in a couple of weeks when we talk about the Book of Common Prayer, because he wrote the Book of Common Prayer, the original one, in the year 1549 is when it was published. Now, before King Edward became king and Henry was still king, his dad, remember before I said that Henry did not want the Reformation to happen in England because he didn't want the destabilizing effects of the Reformation in his country. While Henry was king, but while the church was no longer under the Pope but was under Henry, the actual functioning of the church didn't change at all. It still looked exactly like the Roman Catholic Church had before, except without the Pope as the head of it. Henry was now the head of the Church of England, but everything else underneath him in the church stayed exactly the same. He didn't want anything to change because of that destabilization ability. Once Henry dies, Thomas Cranmer, the Archbishop, who was a reformer all along, finally gets to put his practices into his ideas into practice under Henry's son Edward, who was being tutored by Cranmer this whole time. Cranmer actually had been in Germany years before, during the Reformation in Germany, and got married. Okay? That was not a thing at the time. He was a priest in the Roman Catholic Church, and he got married secretly during this.
Yikes.
Yeah. And then when it becomes the Church of England, and now it's under Edward, and now we're a new church, and it's a church that's being reformed, now Cranmer can say, hey, I'm married. Yay, let's all get married, because marriage is great. And that's one of the reasons that the Church of England all churches of the Reformation, clergy can be married, but that's why it happened in England. So, that was Cranmer. Edward VI. Unfortunately, Edward VI, as I said, was sickly, and he only ruled for a couple of years before he died.
At what age?
He was a teenager. I can't remember exactly. He would have been like 16 or 17, I think. I'd have to look it up, though. He somewhere in his mid to late teens.
Okay.
Yep.
So we have his Mary and Elizabeth left.
That's right. That's one. I'm just kidding, Jeff. So here's the Book of Common Prayer. Well, again, we'll talk about it later on. Cranmer wrote this in 1549, revised it in 1552, and then it was revised again in 1559. And that's the one that was in effect for about 100 years. Oops. I skipped a slide. No, I didn't. What is this?
Bloody Mary.
That's right.
Very familiar.
There she is. All right. This is the person that the drink's named after.
Oh, really? I
Yeah.
didn't know that.
Mary Tudor. Mary, the daughter of Catherine of Aragon. Catherine of Aragon, Henry's first wife, becomes queen after Edward dies. And now something interesting happens. In order to legitimate her reign in England, she had to bring the church back to the Roman Catholic, or to bring the country back into the Roman Catholic Church under the Pope. Why? Because if they were under the Roman Catholic Church, then the divorce that Henry had with Catherine of Aragon never actually happened. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, she would be a legitimate heir. If the divorce does happen, then she stops being a legitimate heir and can't be queen.
Because it would go to.
Because it would
Edward.
go to Edward. Well, it was going to go to Edward anyway because he was a boy.
Right.
But it would go to her sister, Elizabeth. So she brings the church, brings the country back to Rome, and she does it in a very, very violent fashion. She does it in such a violent fashion that she becomes known in history as Bloody Mary. She burns several people at the stake. Oh, there's Mary Tudor. Oh, wait, did I skip a slide? I feel like my thing isn't as detailed as it used to be. Queen Mary Tudor kills several bishops, including our friend Thomas Cranmer, at the stake. She burns him as well as several other of the bishops at the stake. Thankfully for us, she only rules for a couple of years before she also dies. And now we have another succession fight because Henry has one more child left.
Did she die of natural causes,
she did.
or was she killed?
No, she died of natural causes. Well, that's what history says.
Right.
Who knows?
Right.
Maybe there was a thing. But no, as far as we know, she died of natural causes. Her half-sister, who the daughter of Anne Boleyn, the woman who Henry beheaded, becomes queen next. But in order for her to legitimate her claim as queen, we have to bring this country back to the new way of doing church, the Church of England, or else her claim is illegitimate, because the divorce between Catherine of Aragon and Henry VIII had to be legitimate for Elizabeth to be in the line of succession. So now, once Mary's out of the way, Elizabeth can say, no, we are Church of England, we are not Roman Catholic, and now because we're Church of England, my dad's divorce to his first wife is legitimate, and now I can be queen. And unlike her sister and brother, Elizabeth lived a very long life and ruled for about 40 years, dying in 1603. She did not marry, and she had no heirs, which is why she's sometimes known as the Virgin Queen. It's also where the state of Virginia, its name comes from that. And so Elizabeth, I should have a picture of Cate Blanchett in here, but I didn't. Oh well. She played her in the movie. She ruled for 40 years, dying in 1603, and then that is when King James I, James Stuart, who was the King of Scotland at the time, becomes King of England, and he becomes King James of the King James Bible, and then his line takes over for the next 80 years or so. And so the Church of England begins because of Henry's avarice over the monastery's wealth and over his desire to bed and marry other women besides his wife. But after a decade or so of instability, it finds stability in his daughter, Elizabeth, who makes a compromise between the more conservative Roman-leaning side of the church and the more liberal, progressive, reform side of the church. And that is where we ended up with the Via Media that we talked about last week, the middle way, which puts Anglicanism, the Church of England, the Episcopal Church, right dead center between Protestants and Roman Catholics. We are not Protestants because we did not protest anything. There was no protest that started the Anglican Church. The Anglican Church started because of the story I just told you. And the principles of the Reformation were added on later and codified within the Book of Common Prayer under Elizabeth. But never fully towards Lutheranism and Calvinism. We charted this middle way that linked the two churches. So.
And she was the daughter of Anne Boleyn.
Anne Boleyn's daughter, correct. Yep. So in those couple of years before Anne Boleyn died or was killed, she was born. Yep. So that's the story. Questions? I have another story to tell after this.
Who was her bishop?
Her bishop? Ooh,
Yeah.
That's a good question. I'm not sure who was archbishop after Thomas Cranmer. I'd have to look it up. Yeah, I'm not. It's not in my brain. Any other questions? What do you think of that story? Kind of bloody, huh?
Yeah.
It had more
shocking.
detail than I was aware of.
When Thomas Ely told me the story, and it was much more theological, like talking much more about Thomas's contributions to the religion.
To Cranmer's contributions?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to talk more about him when we talk about the Book of Common Prayer. I like to do this lesson as a more of a political, historical one, because I think that that's more true to what actually happened. Cranmer, like I said, was definitely a reformer who had very strong opinions about what the church should look like. But during Henry's reign, he couldn't exercise those opinions because Henry was not going to go for it. And there were very powerful people in that group who were kind of watching Cranmer to make sure that he wasn't going to try to influence Henry too deeply, because they wanted to hold on to that power structure that was waffling at the time, because Parliament was taking on more powers at this time as well. And so that's people like Thomas Cromwell, who the books are about, we talked about before, Wolf Hall and so forth. But yeah, from a theological standpoint, Cranmer's biggest ideas have to do with common people being able to pray on their own without the need of clergy. And that's where the concepts of morning and evening prayer come from. They come from a monastic tradition, but then he puts them in the Book of Common Prayer. So everyday people, as long as they can read, can say prayers. And that was a huge revolutionary idea, that just anybody could pick up a book and pray to God. That you didn't need somebody with a collar on to be a mediator between you and God. That was a big deal. All right.
Is
Good.
that still a view that the Catholic Church holds? That you still need?
I mean, if not in name, then probably in practice. Yeah. I mean, the idea of the church is that the Pope is the mediator between
Right.
Christ and his church, or the church is the mediator between people and God. Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure if they would just come out and say that, but I think it still is a pretty well-held viewpoint.
Right. Yeah, I thought Catholics would still believe that they can pray on their own, but is it, perhaps maybe viewed as through the power of, of the Pope or something?
Maybe. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that... So whenever I'm in a group of people and I'm not here at the church and they all look at me and say, hey, can you say grace or can you pray? I'm going to go, no, you do it. If I'm the one that always has to pray, then I'm not doing my job, which is to help you guys learn how to do that. I don't want to be a mediator between you and God. I mean, I can be a teacher and I can be a helper and a guide, but I'm not, it's not like a hierarchy. I'm not a middle manager between you and God. This is not, office space.
Yeah.
All right. I got about 15 minutes or so left to do my other one. So can we go ahead and do that? Let's see here. I'm not going to go through this entire other PowerPoint because it's very long, but I am going to go through a little bit of it.
Just quickly to answer your question, Cardinal Reginald Pole became Archbishop of
thanks.
Canterbury immediately following the deprivation of Thomas Cranmer, and was the last Roman Catholic to hold the position.
And then who was it during Elizabeth? Who's next after that?
Matthew Parker was immediately following Reginald Pole, served from 1559 to 1575,
Okay.
taking office after the death of Pole and Mary.
Got it. Interesting. Yeah, so he would have been the first one
Yeah,
during.
so-
He's not a name that's like super familiar to me. So I would imagine that he, did stuff, but it wasn't like super important within the church. So. I'm not going to go through this entire thing because this is the whole history of the Episcopal Church from the founding of it until today, basically. But I do want to do the beginning because I think it's important. And we're going to go basically a little bit of colonial history and then around the Revolution. Those are the two most important times for this particular class. So we started with, we just did this slide, so we're going to go here. Here's our friend that we just met in our last slideshow, Elizabeth I, and it is during the her reign where like the Roanoke colony was founded and then abandoned, and it was during her cousin James's reign that Jamestown and Plymouth get founded. So here they are. Again, I'm going to go through these. I'm not going to talk about every one of these slides. Jamestown was named after James. Or I could talk about Pocahontas right now. This is important now. The Church of England was established as the official religion of the colony of Virginia. This is before the concept of the separation of church and state, before the First Amendment, and so forth. Every one of the colonies, except Rhode Island, had an official religion, or an official... When I say religion, they're all Christian, but at this time, different sects of Christianity don't get along really at all. But the Church of England was the established church in the colony of Virginia, unlike New England, where the established churches... Hey, Patrick.
Right.
We just started talking about the history of the Episcopal Church. We just went through the how Henry VIII, divorced and killed a lot of his wives and stuff.
Henry VIII.
Yeah, you know that bit. Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
So we're into the what will become the United States. In New England, Massachusetts became Puritan, and the Pilgrims and the Puritans came and founded Plymouth and then the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Then they came down into Connecticut as well. Whereas Rhode Island, founded by Roger Williams, was founded as a colony of religious independence. And that was a really big deal, that they would have the ability to have independent thought in Rhode Island. The interesting thing here in Virginia, the Church of England being the official religion, is that the church was supported by taxes at the time. And then in England, like I just did this slide. All right, we're gonna skip there. There's the three colonies we were just talking about: Plymouth, Massachusetts Bay, and Virginia. These are the early colonies. So it took a while in the New England for the Church of England to be welcomed, which kind of makes sense because the Puritans and the Pilgrims left England to get away from the Church of England. So it makes sense that the places that they settled, they wouldn't want the Church of England there. Okay, we're going to skip this. Now, in 1689, we have the Act of Toleration. You got to love that when we start tolerating each other. But I guess we can, we have to tolerate before we can, love and accept each other. We start with toleration. They could finally organize churches in the late 1600s. By the way, this happened in 1689, right after the what's it called? The Glorious Revolution in England, when the last of the Tudors gave way to William and Mary, who became the new kings of England, King and Queen of England. They were from the Netherlands, and there's a whole other story behind all that. The interesting thing is that they still had to pay taxes that went to Congregationalist parishes for a while. Let's see. We're not going to talk about John Wesley or George Whitefield, but we'll talk about Connecticut. In 1750, Connecticut had 19 Anglican congregations, including 2 St. James's right nearby. St. James in New London and St. James in Preston were founded 300 years. They had just had their 300th anniversary last year in New London. That is the big church with the spire on Federal Street. Yeah. And then St. James in Preston is way out in the boonies. It's pretty close to NFA. Yeah. It's a lovely area. Interestingly enough, the Church of England, as we get up towards the Revolution, was in a lot of trouble in the colonies. It mostly had to do with it being seen as the Church of the wealthy, and also as anti-English feeling. The Anglican clergy in the colonies remained loyal to England during the Revolution. That's an important thing to note. They were Tories. Only some of the clergy were patriots, but most of the Anglican clergy in New England were supporting the British side, including Samuel Seabury, who's very important, and he'll be the main character of the last part of this story. All right, so here's some guys who were Anglican. You know most of these names probably.
Benjamin Franklin.
We got Benjamin Franklin on the left there, George Washington. The other guys you probably don't necessarily recognize: George Mason, John Jay, James Madison, James Monroe, John Marshall, and Patrick Henry. Let's see. So let's just real quick. John Jay was the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court and also helped write the Federalist Papers. James Madison, of course, and James Monroe were presidents of the United States as well as secretaries of state for the presidents before them. John Marshall was the second Supreme Court Chief Justice and also the one who wrote the decision that basically made the Supreme Court work. Marbury versus Madison. And then Patrick Henry is the guy who said,
Give me liberty or give me
"Give
death.
me liberty or give me death." Right. So there's some famous Anglicans there.
I thought Benjamin Franklin was a deist at most.
Well, he still went to. He and George Washington both went to Anglican churches, but whether or not they were really deists is a whole other story.
Washington?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, they all had deist kind of leanings. The idea of the deism is that, God set the world in motion and then left.
Took a step back.
And then, but they at least had some affiliation with an Anglican church. All right, let's see. So, the name Church of England was obviously problematic. So they started calling themselves the Episcopal Church, also using the title Protestant Episcopal Church a little bit. And this is now where we've skipped the actual Revolutionary War. But I will say, I didn't say this earlier, I mentioned the guy Samuel Seabury. We'll get to that in a second. Samuel Seabury has a cameo in the show Hamilton. If anybody of you've seen Hamilton?
Yeah, it was written actually right by the guy who wrote it went to Eugene O'Neill.
Oh,
Talking
right.
about the African American Hamilton.
No, I'm talking about I'm talking about Lin-Manuel Miranda's play Hamilton.
Yeah.
Samuel Seabury is in it as a character. He's the one who sings the song "A Farmer Refuted," where he and Hamilton got into a pamphlet war during the early days of the Revolution, with Samuel Seabury saying, "Don't piss off England," and Hamilton saying, "Yeah, we're gonna piss off England." And so that's where his claim to fame nowadays is that he's got a little cameo in the show Hamilton.
Just fun fact: the Eugene O'Neill Theater, the guy who wrote that, he was a
that's
student
cool.
there at the Eugene O'Neill.
That's really interesting. So we have this. The interesting thing is that this is the flaw. After the Revolution, we had set up our own version of the Church of England in the United States called the Episcopal Church. But before the Revolution, there were no American bishops. One of the ways that England controlled the colonies was by making Americans go to England to get ordained to be priests. You could not get ordained to be a priest in the United States. You had to go to England. And so people like Samuel Seabury went to England to get ordained and came back. There were no bishops here. That was a problem in the Church of England, the Episcopal Church, because we were a church that believed in what's called apostolic succession. In other words, our bishops go back in an unbroken line all the way, purportedly, to St. Peter, and each bishops were made with each of them laying on hands to each other all the way up until my bishop, who laid hands on me as a priest and so forth. They had no bishops. I did do it. There it is. That's the song. I forgot that this was in here. My slides are a little out of order. So, in 1783, this is 2 years after the Revolutionary War ended, right here in Woodbury, Connecticut, 10 clergy met secretly and selected Samuel Seabury to be their bishop, the bishop of the state of Connecticut. The problem, of course, is that Seabury would have to go to England to get ordained to be a bishop. But that's not going to work, right? Because they just had a war with England. What are we going to do? And remember, Seabury was supportive of the British during the Revolution. So here he is. He's buried at St. James in New London. So that mitre right there, that's the hat a bishop wears, is still at the diocesan offices. It's in glass at the diocesan office, sort of a cool artifact. So the cool thing about Seabury is that he goes to England to get ordained, and the Church of England says, okay, we will make you a bishop, but you have to swear allegiance to the King of England. This is a guy, Samuel Seabury, who up until very recently swore allegiance to the King of England, right? Because he was on the British side during the Revolution. And Seabury said, I can't do that, I'm sorry. Why would he do that? Well, because he's not British anymore, he's American. Now that he is part of the United States of America, Seabury has enough what's the word I'm looking for?
Wherewithal?
I was going to say
Sway.
fidelity, and integrity, to not just take that easy path and say, yeah, sure, I'll swear an allegiance to England. No, he's an American now. He can't swear allegiance to England because that's not his country. He lives in the United States. And so they say, well, sorry, we're not going to ordain you. And so Seabury has a bright idea, goes up to Scotland, and Scotland is always ready to tweak the nose of England, right? And he gets Scottish bishops who are in the line of apostolic succession to ordain him bishop. They're called the non-juring bishops, which we don't have enough time to talk about what that means. But basically, the Scottish bishops were like, we don't care about what England says. We want to be our own country anyway. So we'll make you a bishop. You go home and you can make priests. So Seabury comes home, and the Episcopal Church in Connecticut becomes organized in 1785, and he is the first bishop of the Episcopal Church in England. Then right after that, England changed the rules, and the next couple of Episcopalians who came over to England, the English ordained bishop, because they kind of saw the writing on the wall that the United States was now its own thing, and we're not going to piss you off anymore. And so the next couple became, this is a different James Madison, by the way, not the one that became president. And so once they had 3 bishops in the United States, then they could start making their own bishops, because it takes 3 bishops to make a bishop. And then we are organized. And we have the first General Convention of the Episcopal Church in the year 1787. They create a Book of Common Prayer for the Episcopal Church, and it looks exactly like the one in England, except for one very small change, and it's the word king, where we don't pray for the king, we pray for the state. So that's the only difference in the entire first Episcopal prayer book. And other than that, it's exactly like the Church of England. The interesting thing is that at this time, the same people who are writing the Constitution of the United States and trying to organize the United States as government are also thinking about what the Episcopal Church is going to look like. And so they came up with the bicameral legislature for the Episcopal Church, meaning we had a House of Bishops and a House of Deputies, which looked a lot like the House of Lords and the House of Commons in England. And those same people were creating the organs of government, and that's where we come up with the Senate and the House of Representatives and so forth. And all of that was happening at the same time. And so in the early days of the church, we had, like I said, the Constitution. It was 1789, not 1787. I messed that up. The convention met in 1789, and they adopted the prayer book in 1789, and now we were our own church. Still part of the Church of England, because we were in communion with them, but our own self-governing part of that wider Anglican communion. And that is, I believe, that's the end of that. So, questions, comments? I ran you through that very quickly.
When did you start this? Did I walk in like a half hour late?
Yeah.
Because I was at choir.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So you missed the part about Henry VIII, but I recorded it. I'll send it to you.
Okay, cool.
Questions, comments, thoughts? There's some history for you.
Yeah. So we're in full communion with the Church of England still, of course.
Yep.
Right.
All of the Anglican Church. Yep.
Right. Are we also in full communion with some Lutheran churches?
Mm-hmm. With the Evangelical
ELCA.
Lutheran Church of America, the ELCA, we have something called the Call to Common Mission with them. So Episcopal priests and Lutheran pastors can serve in each other's churches. Yeah.
Is there another church that we have that with?
Not in the same way as the Lutherans, but we have certain relationships with a few other denominations, Methodists and a few others. The Methodist Church came out of the Anglican Church, so
Okay. That was
while back.
the part we skipped about John Wesley.
We skipped that about John Wesley, right? Yeah. Any other questions, comments?
I guess just going off that, like, very briefly, are there any parallels between Episcopalianism and Lutheranism?
Yeah,
in
so
terms of acceptance.
somewhat. Yeah, I mean, the ELCA, the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, ELCA, is the more progressive part of Lutheranism. If you went to one of their churches, it would have a very similar vibe that you have here. Very similar vibe. The Lutheran Church in Gales Ferry is wonderful. St. David. Their pastor, Heidi, is one of my best friends. She's fantastic. And yeah, so it's pretty similar. There are very conservative Lutherans as well. The Missouri Synod Lutherans are very conservative. So there are different types of Lutherans as well.
So there's a spectrum.
Yeah, same deal. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Jeff, do you have any questions? You can talk if you want to.
No, that was very good.
All right.
I understand Seabury was not of sound mind. Have you heard this?
No, like at the end of his life or throughout his life?
Yeah, and that's why they immediately got 3 more bishops named.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that part of the story.
I have a very, 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 very basic question.
Sure.
Because you accidentally called Chuck a...
I called him a bishop by accident during church today.
What is just the hierarchy?
Sure. Yeah. So it's not a hierarchy. That's the interesting thing. I joked about promoting him, but the Episcopal Church has 4 orders of ministry.
Okay.
There are bishops, priests, deacons, and lay people. You are all lay people.
Okay.
Lay people is actually one of those things like ATM machine, where ATM machine means automatic teller machine, or PIN number means personal identification number.
A lay is just
Laity, lay means people. So saying lay people means people. But whatever. The laity. So your laity, you are empowered by your baptism to be full participants in the mission of God in the church. Deacons, priests, and bishops are set apart through ordination. I'll talk about this when we talk about sacraments in another session. Are set apart by ordination with specific roles in the church. Deacons have a role of proclaiming the gospel and translating the needs of the world to the church, basically saying, hey, church, this is what the world needs and we should be doing it. Bishops are in charge of dioceses, larger structures of the church. They are the instruments of unity within the church. They are in communion with one another, which is how the dioceses are in communion with each other. And they also are the pastoral support for priests, as well as Bishop Jeff is not my boss, but he does have pastoral authority over me. It's a little weird in that, like, I'm not his he's not my direct report. Or is that backwards? I'm not his direct report? Which one is it?
I think it's the second one.
Whatever. You know what I'm saying. I'm not his subordinate. I am in charge of this church.
You explained that last week.
But I do have certain things that I've promised to be, to say to my bishop, I will obey what you say. But that's his job. And as a priest, my job is to help shepherd a local congregation and to do 3 specific things. That is absolve, bless, and consecrate, ABC. And so in a church service, if you see me make the sign of the cross like this, that's me doing one of the 3 things that only a priest does: absolve, bless, and consecrate. So watch me do this sign of the cross like this. I do it 3 times every service, and it's during the 3 moments where I'm acting as a priest, doing the things that only priests do. Everything else in a service somebody else could do. But those 3 things I'm set apart to do specifically within the church. Again, it's not a hierarchy where bishops are more important than priests, who are more important than deacons, who are more important than lay people. That's not how it works. It's a flat system where different roles are given to different people based on their call. And as a priest, I'm called to a certain ministry within the church, but I'm not like your boss, or I'm not more important than you.
Is this unique to Episcopalianism? Or?
There are other Protestant denominations who have orders of ministry. They can be a little bit different, but we have, I would say we're unique in the sense that we have the same orders of ministry that the Catholic Church has, but in the Catholic Church it is much more hierarchical in the sense that a bishop is the priest is working under the bishop. The bishop is under the archbishop. The archbishop is under the cardinal, and the cardinal is under the pope. And they are. It is a hierarchy.
Yeah.
That's the difference. I can also get married. He says, pointing to his tattoo. Any other questions today?
Sorry,
What?
that's a tattoo.
Yeah, it's my tattoo wedding ring. I stopped wearing my wedding ring a couple years ago. I got a
I love
tattoo
this
of it.
church.
That one's the first word of the Lord's Prayer in Aramaic.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm getting another one later
There you
today.
go. Oh, very cool.
But,
I got 4 on my back too. Any other questions? All right. Next week we're going to talk about the Bible and specifically how we think of. I'm not going to explain the whole Bible,
Exactly.
but I'm going to talk about how we understand the Bible as the Episcopal Church, where it comes from, and what we think about how we interpret the Bible and ways to interpret the Bible as opposed to ways other churches might think about the Bible.
Do you talk about the 3 lenses?
What's that?
Do you talk about the 3 lenses?
Which 3 lenses?
The text of the Bible, tradition,
And reason.
and reason.
Yeah, well, I mean, I won't say it specifically like that, but that's basically, yeah.
I was recently gifted. I remember when my father was here a few weeks ago with the woman
Yeah.
that I used to work with from
Yep.
Florida. She actually gave me a Bible as a gift.
Very
and
cool.
It's green and there's trees all over. She's like, that was on purpose.
Nice.
You would read it. And is highlighting in a Bible, is that considered blasphemous? or
No,
something?
no. Highlight away.
So I can bring it here.
Yeah.
It's leather bound. It's
Yeah.
really nice.
Highlight away. Mark in the
'Cause
margins.
We'll be going through certain.
Sure,
things.
mark in the margins all you want. That's actually a huge tradition in the church. The ancient or the medieval monks who would write Bibles in the scriptoria before they had the printing press often did what were called glosses, where they would write little notes to each other in the margins of the Bibles they were writing. There are famous examples of a guy writing poems about his cat in the margin of the Bible that he is currently working on. So it is absolutely okay to write in your Bible, to highlight it, to underline it, do whatever you want. It's yours.
Duly noted.
Yeah. All right.
Redact.
Maybe not redacted, but alrighty. I think that's enough for today. Thank you, everybody. That's always a fun class
Can we
to teach.
access these classes somehow online?
You're
The
talking about
recordings that you were
the
talking